welcome to today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Like, comment, subscribe as always, and also check the show out on social media at Hoty Raw Takes on Instagram, Hoty Andrew on X, and Facebook, Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Lots going on in college football right now, some big games taking place both yesterday and, of course, today. And I just want to start off the show by sending my thoughts and prayers to those who are in New Orleans, those who have been affected by the tragedy. That was some horrible, horrible news to see, especially, and for Las Vegas as well. Horrible, horrible news to see what took place in New Orleans and Las Vegas. And I am praying for the families. I am praying for those who've been affected by the tragedies. And I just want to send my hopes, thoughts, and prayers to anyone who may have been affected by what took place in New Orleans and Las Vegas. Very, very sad situation, especially New Orleans, especially. I know that was a much bigger event that took place there. So very sad to see that news and those headlines, and obviously much bigger than sports. So the Sugar Bowl taking place today. As I'm recording this, the Sugar Bowl is still going on. Notre Dame leads 23-10 as I'm recording this. So that score is far from final, so I'm not going to touch too much on the Notre Dame-Georgia game. I'll just say this: if Notre Dame does hold on, it proves more that the SEC was very weak and that something's going on with these byes, these four teams that got the bye. All possibly could be getting eliminated. As I said, the Georgia-Notre Dame game is still going on as I'm recording this, so I'm not going to harp on that one too much. But definitely with the teams getting the byes, is too much time rest going to be an affection? That's a big question going into what may take place with the college football playoff next year. So we'll have to see what takes place with that. I just thought I'd point that out. So we'll talk a little bit about Ohio State and Oregon. Ryan Day saved his job yesterday. I don't necessarily know if it's right or wrong. We know how much I harp on Ryan Day for not being able to beat Michigan, but I don't think there's a doubt that at this point he saved his job. It probably wasn't even on the line since the Tennessee game. Ohio State's probably on their way cruising to a national title. They are playing out of their mind. They're all over the place. I mean, I did not expect them to tear apart Oregon like they did. I expected Dan Lanning team to actually play a lot better, so I'm very disappointed from the Oregon Ducks standpoint of things that they didn't actually put up more of a fight. But Ryan Day absolutely saved his job yesterday. To our dismay, I know everyone in Ann Arbor is probably celebrating right now because that game is everything, that Michigan game, and it's part of the job description. But if Ohio State's cruising to a national championship right now, obviously the Buckeyes are going to ride the wave. And, the athletic director at the end of the day, not from Ohio, not probably as engulfed with this rivalry as so many of us in Ohio are, but I can keep harping on that Michigan game all day long. At this point, the Michigan game is probably going to become less and less relevant in terms of what's going on with the college football playoff. I still am going to say that game is everything. Michigan's probably going to have a much better program next year and contend again. I still think they're really well coached under Sharon Moore. They did take down Alabama. So, props to Michigan there, I guess. I'm not crediting Michigan, obviously. I hate Michigan. I'm not a Michigan fan. I'm just saying that loss to Michigan still stings, and it still haunts this season for me. But having said that, though, Ryan Day had that team prepared, ready to go. Obviously, the recruiting is really, really well done. You look at a guy like Will Howard, who transferred here, and how he played yesterday for the Buckeyes. You look at Jeremiah Smith. I remember watching ESPN earlier today. I saw a clip from Dan Orlovsky talking about how Jeremiah Smith, and listen, I'm not a huge Dan Orlovsky fan, I'm not going to lie. But for his point on Jeremiah Smith, though, I thought was really good. I thought it was really down to the wire about how Jeremiah Smith, eventually, when he is draft eligible, could be the best player in that draft, and any team would be really happy to have him. And he's still got a few years of college left. He's a specimen, and he put on one hell of a show against the Oregon Ducks. And Ohio State, riding their way possibly to a national title, that's going to be big, riding off what Jeremiah Smith was able to do yesterday. Unreal. Emeka Egbuka also scored a touchdown. I still think he's a pretty good weapon that the Ohio State Buckeyes have used at their disposal. You look at the defense, obviously, it's loaded up. And the way they've been able to do it with Caleb Downs on the front. You look at a guy like Denzel Burke at times. It's one hell of a defense, too. And they shut down Oregon in that first half completely. Nothing was going Oregon's way. And Dan Lanning, who I thought has been an exceptional coach all year, he looked like Ryan Day against Michigan yesterday. It looked like the moment was too big. And maybe it was for Oregon, and that's probably why they lost. But the moment was too big for the Oregon Ducks, and it showed in that game the entire way out. They did try to come back and make it somewhat close, but 41-21 is still a blowout. Ohio State's advancing, and Ohio State didn't make it relatively close as an 8 seed. they're moving on, playing in the semifinal against Texas. Now, Texas kind of escaped their game against Arizona State, but I do like that matchup for Ohio State. If you were to tell me the last complete team left in the field, and I'm still going to include Georgia in this, you may be watching this and Georgia may have already lost. Maybe Georgia came back and Notre Dame is going to be playing Penn State. I don't know, obviously, but I'm just going to say that between Notre Dame and Georgia, Penn State, who Ohio State already beat, I don't even think they compare to Penn State. And, of course, Texas, Ohio State on paper is the best team left. They should have no problem winning a national title. At this point, rooting for the Buckeyes to win that national title would be great. Ryan Day will have that check mark next to his name. The Michigan game, yada, 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 as I said. I'm going to just try to ignore that game as much as I can because that game still means everything to me. But I look at Ohio State cruising their way, hopefully, to a national title, and I'm just thinking to myself, wow. The college football, the SECA is awful this year. Very disappointing and underwhelming, to say the least. Arizona State proving they belonged big time yesterday. It just stinks that Texas kind of escaped with that win the way they did on that 4th and 13, and a miracle at the same time. But that was one kind of football game I would have thought from start to finish would have never gone the way it did. I really thought Texas was just going to hammer Arizona State once it got out of hand, but Arizona State fought the whole way through. You look at how close that game was by the end. They had that safety and everything changed really for them. They were able to tie the game at 24. They went to overtime. They came out guns a-blazing. That's really how it felt for the Arizona State Sun Devils yesterday. So that was one heck of a game that the Sun Devils were able to put up. And they just kept going and going and going at the end. And then Texas really put in a lot of fight too. They had some missed field goals. It looked like they were struggling with their kicker because at that one drive you thought they'd run the clock out. But no, they kept really trying to inch their kicker to kick in the way of the possible taking the lead for Texas or tie. I believe I'm trying to remember all the highlights from that portion of the game because that overtime sequence was just amazing. And the Texas Longhorns are absolutely going to take that away. And I mean, as I said, guns a-blazing. I mean, for both teams, Arizona State really put up a fight. They proved they belonged. I don't know if they proved necessarily they deserved the bye, but having said that, though, Arizona State put up one hell of a fight, and the Sun Devils, we'll have to see what their future looks like and how many guys head up to the NFL draft. But, man, that was one hell of a football game. That was the best game so far of this slate. Ohio State, well, it was pretty much over by halftime, so I really can't say that was a great game per se. It was great for the Buckeyes. But that Arizona State-Texas game was a classic, an absolute classic. So what a game that was by the Sun Devils, putting up that fight, obviously proving they belong. The committee definitely got the field of teams right. I will say that over and over again. Even Indiana belonged. Alabama proved to you losing to Michigan that they had no business being in the top 12 teams. I think you look at Ohio State and what they've been able to do. I think they've kind of been an underdog in terms of, Oregon probably has been the favorite this whole time. But the fact they came in there and beat Oregon the way they did, it's stunning to me. And Ohio State might be cruising to a national title. But that Michigan blemish is still going to hurt. I wonder if the folks in Ann Arbor actually are rooting for Ohio State right now. I mean, seeing that the rivalry is still filled with hate, I'm saying probably not. But having said that, I mean, you look at the way they were playing against Ohio State. I mean, they were playing like that was their national championship this year. And if Ohio State does go on to win the whole thing, I wonder if the folks in Ann Arbor are going to kind of hold it over their head and say, ha, 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 we beat the national title, And that'll be a long 365 days, or less than 365 days now, seeing that it is the year 2025. So, what a game by Ohio State, as I said, over Oregon. Ryan Day saved his job. Is it necessarily the thing I wanted to happen? I really put emphasis on that Michigan game, as you all well know. But this is the way college football is going to be from now on out. We have this transfer portal. We have NIL. You have to work within the system if you're going to build a good program. And Ohio State and Ryan Day tend to do that within the system. And regardless of the outcome of that Michigan game, if you win a national title out of this and are contending for the next 5-6 years with that national title, possibly hanging over your head, yeah, you're in really good shape. Really good shape. But as I said, that Michigan game still just hangs over the head of this season. It just puts a dark cloud on what could have been. If you get 2 field goals in that game or start passing the ball instead of running it against Michigan, you might win it. And I know, I keep putting emphasis on it. I'm going to keep putting emphasis on it. Let's take away from Ohio State what we saw yesterday. They got a really good win over Oregon. They came back. They bounced back over the first meeting. Ohio State on paper has been the more talented team, and they executed as though they were the more talented team this year. Ohio State on paper probably is the best team in college football. But that Michigan game just stinks. That's the bottom line of it, and I know I keep reiterating it, but it does. It really, really does. So that's my thoughts on what happened with Ohio State. As I said, Texas, Arizona State, great game. I watched a little bit of the beginning of the Notre Dame-Georgia game. Great way to start things off. I don't really think the pressure is too much under Kirby Smart if he doesn't win this game for the Georgia Bulldogs. I think they come back, bounce back next year. And the SEC as a whole, I think really we learned from the way Texas played against Arizona State. SEC ain't that good. They're just not that good this year. And it's to the credit of their fans. Their fans can be obnoxious at times for all the programs. I'm talking Texas, Alabama. Maybe it's just, that Southern love for football. But, the SEC this year has just not been what the Big Ten has been. Oregon has been a powerhouse. Ohio State, a powerhouse. You look at Indiana, a powerhouse overall, but despite their weak schedule. Notre Dame's not even in a conference, but if they were in the Big Ten, for example, being up here in a northern school, Notre Dame definitely would be in that conversation too, and possibly still is. And Penn State's a powerhouse too. James Franklin has that team ready to go every week, unless it's Ohio State, Michigan, or any other top 5 team. I guess SMU, the win over SMU, but the win over Boise State also kind of chipping into that. Penn State really took care of business in that game too. So yeah, lots to be excited about going in, and I really love this 12-team format overall. A lot of these games have been instant classics. The Penn State game the other day was a classic. Ohio State, Oregon overall was a classic, I would say, despite, as I said, my loathe for the Michigan game. Texas, Arizona State, though, that was the best game of the slate so far. I didn't even expect that to be. I thought this Georgia Notre Dame game was going to be the best, but really, this Texas, Arizona State game, I watched it essentially from start to finish. That was one hell of a game. It really, really was. So I want to give props to both of those programs there. Despite, as I said, Texas being definitely flawed, I would like Ohio State to beat them. Arlington, Texas, though, it's probably going to be much more of a home-style game, but I like that underdog feeling for the Buckeyes. It kind of was out in California, too, when you think about it. A lot of Oregon fans in those stands. Ohio State fans travel very well, though. I mean, it is the second biggest market, Columbus, Ohio, in college football. So we'll have to see what transpires here. January 10th, Ohio State taking on Texas. College football playoff. It's bigger. It's better in a lot of ways. I'm not as huge fan of a lot of this transfer portal NIL stuff, as I've mentioned before, but having said that, this is the landscape of college football now, and this is what we're going to be doing with minor league-esque football, as a lot of people have been pointing out the style of it has been. That's where we're at, and we'll have to see what happens. But a lot of these offenses have been guns a-blazing. A lot of these defenses have been shutting down other teams. I give props to Penn State on the run they've been on. They're one game away from a college football championship. I would love to see an Ohio State-Penn State college football national championship game. That would be awesome. Penn State playing for revenge. Ryan Day playing for his first national title. I'm going to give kudos to Ryan Day for this postseason run, but that Michigan game is still going to be hanging over this season. It just is. I'm just going to keep saying that. But granted, great win over Oregon. Got revenge on a team that beat you earlier this season. Let's see how this transpires for Ohio State. And as I said, for college football, I think this playoff format is the best thing we're getting out of everything college football has been presenting from NIL, transfer portal, yada, yada, yada. This college football playoff is what a lot of us have been asking for, and damn it, we're getting it, and it's been really fun. All right, let's go on to the NFL today. There was a article that came out from ESPN earlier today, Jeremy Fowler, discussing a little bit about the situation going on with Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns, and why they're a mess. Haslam looked like had a lot of influence in the decision to go get Deshaun Watson. What did that mean for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry? I don't know. Obviously, they probably were contributing factors because Baker Mayfield in 2021, I did a whole apology video to Baker Mayfield on how critical I was of him in 2021, despite me actually liking Baker Mayfield a lot. And I'm rooting for him like mad. Snubbed from the Pro Bowl, by the way. But I'll tell you what, Haslam has definitely gotten in this organization's way at times. I think Haslam has really tried all he could to put a winner on the field. So I really want to actually give Jimmy Haslam some credit from that perspective. Despite some major mistakes at times, I think Jimmy Haslam is all set on winning. It just so happens it kind of may get in the way of the football guys with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. I don't know. And from everything that's being reported right now, too, it looks like Kevin Stefanski is coming back for another year. Not so sure Andrew Berry should, but I like the way it's going personally. I like the idea of maybe elevating Andrew Berry to a president of football operations role as opposed to the GM, and maybe get Kevin Stefanski to bring another guy in or something. Because I'm not so sure what Paul DePodesta does. I mean, this is an Oakland Athletic executive, and he's in the organization. And do we really know what he does? The Oakland Athletics, I'm not sure if they play football, do they? Or I guess I should say Las Vegas Athletics soon to be now. But you know what I mean? It's just, I can't wrap my head around Paul DePodesta. I've never been sure what he does. But having said that, that's the situation at hand right now. I mean, if I'm the Cleveland Browns, you're already in an ugly, ugly situation. So for me to just say that right now, you're probably going to get a top 5 pick, possibly top 3, maybe even the first overall pick. Excuse me. But in a class that is not that friendly with quarterback play. I mean, I'm not in on Shedeur Sanders at all. I know a lot of people are. Colorado had an Indiana Hoosier style schedule, and I don't think they were ranked and deserved to be. So I don't think Shedeur Sanders is NFL ready. And nor am I a big fan of Cam Ward. I mean, I like Cam Ward between the two, but I don't think he's going to be like a Bo Nix guy right away. I think he's going to need work before he gets to a guy like Bo Nix or maybe even Jaden Daniels. I don't think he's going to be an impactful rookie right off the rip. And then you have the rumors of the Arch Manning stuff. He's still at Texas. It's going to be another year before he's draft eligible anyway. But, you know, having said that, you look at the situation with the Cleveland Browns and how bad it is. And I want to give Haslam credit for always trying to go in and win. I was for the Deshaun Watson move when it happened. I really was. I thought Deshaun Watson, as I've said before, presented better quarterback intangibles than Baker Mayfield. And he had a better sample size at the time. So far, though, as I said later on in another edition of Raw Takes, Baker Mayfield has 2 playoff wins, Deshaun Watson has 1, and Baker Mayfield, since he's left the Browns, is thriving. Deshaun Watson, before he even came to the Browns, was thriving. And then obviously the off-the-field issues happened. That didn't help. He requested a trade. Probably didn't help him either. He sat out a year. Definitely didn't help. But he was thriving in Houston. And then in 2020, even though he had a great season, the Houston Texans themselves were a mess of an organization. But the Houston Texans already have recovered so much from that, although I think they're in the middle of a little bit of a late season collapse right now. But still, the Houston Texans right now are in a much better position to contend and win a championship than the Cleveland Browns are. So, obviously, this has just been a disaster all around. And what is even more of an indictment on the Browns, you have 3 Pro Bowlers, sure not a huge amount, but 6 alternates. This is a huge indictment on the Browns. 3 Pro Bowlers, 6 alternates. You have Jerry Jeudy, who's been terrific this year starting. You have Myles Garrett. We know he's a future Hall of Famer. You have Denzel Ward. It's been a shut-down corner all season long. And then you look at the alternates. Corey Bojorquez, great punter. We talk about how great the punter is. Joel Bitonio, great Iron Man of a guard. You look at Wyatt Teller, another one. A great offensive lineman there. You look at David Njoku at tight end. Nick Chubb. Definitely not the season we know Nick Chubb could possibly have had, but he's coming off injury. He deserves a break there. You have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Before he got injured, he was a shutdown linebacker. I can go on and on about, there's so many great players on the Cleveland Browns. There really is. And quarterback is the problem. The one position the Browns never get right is quarterback. And wide receiver in terms of the draft, but they do really well getting them in free agency and trades. But the Browns don't have a quarterback. That's the bottom line. And we thought Deshaun Watson was going to be the quarterback. He's not. I don't believe in him going forward. I was a huge believer in him going into this season. I was wrong. I'll admit it. But the Browns have that huge indictment of them of 3 Pro Bowlers, 6 alternates. So that's essentially 9 great NFL players. 9. And you mean to tell me this team's not going to the playoffs and they're 3-13 right now? That is criminal. It's ridiculous. And I don't put that on Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry, and I don't even put that on Haslam, who I'm not trying to defend all the way on Jimmy Haslam when I say that I think he's done whatever it could take to win. I think he has. But something is clearly wrong with this organization. And it's got to start from somewhere. We need to see some more accountability, not just from players, because I think we already know from the 9 players I just mentioned, from Njoku, from Nick Chubb, from Myles Garrett, future Hall of Famer, from Jerry Jeudy, who came in here, who's never had a quarterback in his career and worked his ass off to get a Pro Bowl appearance for this organization. I look at quarterback. Ultimately, the offensive line got better within time. Could use some more work. Obviously, we're missing Bill Callahan, and Jedrick Wills, probably a bust at this point. But the Cleveland Browns have talent on this roster. They could win next year with just one simple thing: get a good quarterback play. Is it going to be Kirk Cousins? Can Deshaun Watson miraculously turn it around? I significantly doubt that, and I think the fan base will be absolutely pissed off if the Browns bring him back, and I'm just being honest. But it's an ugly situation, and it all comes down to the one thing the Browns can't get right, and that's quarterback. It's quarterback. Underlined, highlighted, quarterback. The most important position in pro sports. Maybe the pitcher is, but the quarterback is pretty much a quarterback pitcher. 2 things you always have to have. You have to have pitchers in Major League Baseball, but you only need one quarterback in the NFL. And as long as he's playing good, and you can win with decent quarterback play. I'll be honest with you, you could probably win a Super Bowl with a Baker Mayfield if everything else is right around him. I don't necessarily think he's a Mahomes or a Josh Allen or a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning. But if everything's right around Baker Mayfield, I think you can win a Super Bowl with him. We saw it with Matt Stafford. We see it with Brad Johnson when he played for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in the day. Brad Johnson has more Super Bowl rings than Dan Marino, for crying out loud. So, yeah, I think when you look at the situation with the Browns, it just comes down to the one position they can't get right, and that's quarterback. And QB 40 is going to be starting on Saturday for the Browns. Bailey Zappi. And I'm giving him a round of applause because Bailey Zappi already has a win against the Browns when he was with the Patriots back in 2022. And they just destroyed us in that game. The Browns weren't very good that year either. They weren't this bad, though. This is truly, I honestly will say this, I think this is worse than the 1-31 stretch. Because it just doesn't feel like the answer is not in the building. We know the coach is right. At least we all think the coach is right, Kevin Stefanski. We know that there's talent on the roster. If you have 3 Pro Bowlers and 6 alternates, that's pretty damn good. So we know there's a lot of things right already in the building. The question's going to be, what's going to come in from outside the building to make everything better? I don't know if I have the answer to that. We'll have to see how this pans out. It's a tricky situation. Bailey Zappi, credit to him. Quarterback 40 coming in against the Baltimore Ravens. And then maybe QB 41. Who knows who will be going into 2025. But a lot to work on with the Cleveland Browns. That's going to be it for today's edition of Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. Like, comment, subscribe. I want to hear your Raw Takes. Please make sure to send them below. More on our upcoming contest coming up in the later weeks. Short Take Saturday. This Saturday is back. I was recovering from a little bit of illness this weekend, so as you could probably tell in the recent videos of Raw Takes, that's been the case. But I will have more Raw Takes coming up for you next week, of course, as well. But stay tuned for Short Take Saturday, this upcoming Saturday. We'll talk about the Cavs. We'll talk more about some of this college football stuff. And, of course, what's going on in the NFL Week 18. Some big games coming up. That Lions-Vikings game is going to be one game to watch. Possibly the game of the century in the NFL. With 2 guys a lot of people gave up on. Sam Darnold, Jared Goff. I love the story. Love the headlines. Love Dan Campbell. Love Kevin O'Connell. We'll talk about that on Short Take Saturday. Have a good one, everybody.